We're in the middle of Mother's Day today, and we're in the middle of a series here about why church, and we're going to talk about that here in a second. Let me start by saying Happy Mother's Day to all the moms who are here. We're glad that you're here, and we have a gift for you as you come in or as you leave, one or the other. We want to make sure you get that, and again, it's important to us that you know that we prize you and that it's a hard work that you do, and we're grateful for it. One of the terms that the Bible uses, our series about church, one of the terms the Bible uses to describe the church is a family. It uses that phrase more than once, in fact. And it says that we're supposed to be a family. It uses other phrases, that we're supposed to be like a body and supposed to be like a fellowship and a flock, even, Jesus says. But family pops up there quite a bit. And it's a complicated thing, thinking about the church like a family for a lot of people, because not everybody's family worked like it should have. And I know that Mother's Day can be painful for some people, either because your mother's gone, you know, she's passed, or sometimes it can be something a little more intense than that, a divorce and you don't ever see mom again, or just a mom who really wasn't attentive, who's not very good at being a mom. And dads, it'll be even worse on Father's Day. So I'm not throwing stones that way. And I know somehow when we talk about the church being a family, for some people that kind of instinctively, not a trigger exactly, but it makes you stiffen up a little bit because you think about your own family. And so the church, I think, when it uses that language, when the Bible authors of the Scripture use that language, they want you to think about the ideal. You know, in an ideal family, in a family that's working like it's supposed to work. That's what church is supposed to be. And I want to kind of explore that together. I'm convinced that most of us know what it should look like, even if we didn't have that ourselves. And I'm mostly convinced about that because of television. When we were kids, right, they would put families on there that worked the right way. And we could watch those families, and then we would know how to do it. And really, these shows here were shows that I watched as a kid. But if you go back a little earlier than that, you know, the Leave It to Beaver or Father Knows Best or those things, it was even more intense. I mean, Dad was always sort of in control, and he always did the right things, and Mom was always supportive, and she always loved the kids no matter what, and the kids always felt safe. And there might be little dramas now and again, you know, with the beaver or something, but for the most part, it worked. And really, most of the shows in my childhood, when it talked about family, that's how it talked. Now, when I had kids, it seemed like TV had kind of changed, and the emphasis suddenly was showing more realism with the families. And a lot of times, you might even mock the families a little because it didn't work like it was supposed to. And it might be kind of a bit of fun to watch. It might even kind of be cathartic if you kind of came through a bad family to laugh at some family that was even more screwed up than yours. But it kind of tilted back and forth. And I don't know when my kids were little if there were that many great examples of family on television. And that tension, right, between the ideal and what's real. And there's that tension and trying to sort through that. And how do we find that middle ground? Now, as Christians, when we talk about the church, I mean, without any doubt at all, he's wanting you to see the ideal. He's wanting you to see what it would look like if it was working like it should. And as you work on that and perfect that in this laboratory that is church, hopefully that bleeds into other parts of your life, right? Your own family starts to show some evidence of that your work relationships, that your relationships with neighbors or maybe extended family and people you don't see, and then it starts to bleed into other things. But it was always the idea, I think, that this place here was going to be that. And I don't want to say fake it till you make it. That's not exactly right. But we would have our eyes real firmly on the ideal. Hebrews chapter 2 says that both the one who makes people holy, and that's Jesus, and those who are being made holy, and that's us, we're of the same family. So Jesus and us, we're in the same family. And so Jesus is not ashamed to call us brothers and sisters. And he says, I'll declare your name to the brothers and sisters, and in the assembly I'll sing your praises. Which is kind of an interesting picture of of God, actually. When you think about different metaphors to describe God, this is kind of an underrated one, and I think it's one of those that you could read and not really think about. And this picture of God singing your praises in heaven. I talk to people at different times, and much more frequently than you'd think, about who worry that they're not being good enough to be where they need to be with God. And again, we want to push for that ideal, and I think some of that can lead to some guilt when some of that's normal and natural, but it can get out of hand, and you can be so worried about, does God even like me? And then there's verses like this. It says, not only does he like you, but like he's showing all of his pictures and his billfold to everybody else about all the awesome things you're doing. That there's something about God that he's singing your praises, that he's not only, to say he's not ashamed to be hung out with us, well, that's cool, but it goes much further than that. He's kind of proud to be associated with you, which is a remarkable thing if you're very self-aware at all. We believe this is what his ideal is. And so it becomes our ideal too, that if he could do that, I mean, again, think about how remarkable that is. If Jesus, being who Jesus is, could want to not only not be ashamed to be associated with us, but actually sing our praises, then how much easier should it be for us to do the same thing? I mean, how much easier should it be for us to treat one another like family and actually be upbeat, hopeful, positive, like a mom or dad watching their kid play soccer when he doesn't know how to play soccer, or t-ball when he don't know how to play t-ball, and you're just cheering every little thing that they do. I mean, that's the goal here. Now, how do you do it? The Bible speaks about that too, of course. In Philippians, it says it's God who works in us to will and to act in order to fulfill it. So the idea is that God, who has this dream, if we allow ourselves to kind of hold on to his hand, he's going to make it happen. We just got to put ourselves in his way. And in fact, on this verse, that's Philippians 2:13. If you look at the verse right before that and add that to it, it says you continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling, knowing that God's working in you. So it's a partnership, right? A partnership in which God's doing 90% of the work, 99% of the work. He's handling almost everything. All you've got to do is continue to get up in the morning and strive in that right direction. And then he sort of empowers it. And there's this ideal. I think in a church, when it is ideal, I mean, churches can be friendly, but then kind of be places that are hard to find friends in at the same time. But that's not the ideal. The ideal is that there's a warmth here and a willingness to sacrifice for one another that you only find in the very best families. Everybody pulling their weight, everybody jumping in, everybody taking some responsibility, not ashamed of the people around them, but actually singing their praises. This was always the dream. Now, again, thinking about your own family, it's easy to say that, but then you've got to deal with the other knuckleheads that are around. And you may be doing the right things, but maybe they're not, Maybe you are giving your very best, but in all you get in return is garbage. You're putting the right input in, but you're not getting anything back. Sometimes you can sacrifice and give, and the other person's not really on your side. And if we're being honest, sometimes you take breaks in how much you want to sacrifice and give. Sometimes you have a bad day too, and you're not really on your game. And so finding that balance between the ideal that we all want and this reality, how do you do that? Well, I looked some things up this week. I got on the interweb there, and I was searching around. And what I found is that most coaches and life gurus there and psychologists, counselors will encourage a couple different approaches, but they usually all center around the same kind of things. Small steps that you can control. Look for small improvement that you can control and just be steady and disciplined in that. And it got me to thinking about, I think that's, I've seen that kind of one of my favorite basketball players went through a pretty big offensive slump several years ago. And when he was asked about it by the reporters, he said his coach had told him, yeah, but your defense should never slump. And so he'd been really focusing harder on his defense. And as he focused harder on his defense, he found the offense was coming around too. And I think that's a good strategy. You focus on what you can control. You keep investing in that best you can. And as you do that, as you keep doing what you do, not worrying about what everybody else is doing, it sort of elevates everything else. It sort of takes you to where you want to go. And anyway, I read all that. I was thinking about this for the sermon. And as I read all that, I was led to another passage where Peter talks about these things. And Peter, over a couple chapters, talks about how we relate to one another. And then at the end of it, he kind of gives these little bullet points. And it's that same kind of thing. You know, you can't do everything, but here's something you can do. And so I just wanted to kind of go through that. And that's really the last scripture I want to dig into is Peter's advice, step by step, you know, kind of, well, how do I get there? I want to get to the ideal, but here I am. How do I get to this other place? So here's his notion. He says, finally, all of you, so not just the super saints, I mean every one of you, every person who's part of the church, if you're in it all of you, he says, I want you to be like-minded. And that's kind of hard, but it's the idea that we remember what we're about. And I've already told you earlier we took communion. We're about Jesus, and Jesus laid his life down. And so then this is the path. This is the way. I know that if I sacrifice my will on a few things, and they sacrifice their will, and we're all working together for these bigger goals, these bigger dreams, these bigger hopes, maybe we can get somewhere. And again, I can't control whether they do it as much as me, right? I can just control my part. Peter says, be sympathetic. You know, try to see their perspective. Try to see why they're doing the things that they're doing. Don't just assume that they're mean because they're evil. And I know there are some legitimately evil people in the world, but most people aren't. Most people, if we're being honest, are way too self-absorbed to create an evil plan for you that day, right? You're more incidental to their concern than you are central. And while there are some legitimately warped and twisted people in the world, and I know that, most people aren't. They're just selfish. So be sympathetic. Try to understand maybe why they're doing the things that they do. Try to see their side. You don't have to agree with it, just try to understand it. He says, love one another and be compassionate and humble. Humble means that you on purpose, you lose sometimes. And you never know how much progress you're making in being a servant and being humble until someone treats you like a servant or treats you kind of humble. And then you'll see. And I have to be honest, before I bounce away from this, I've not always been great at that. That's not an area where I'm real proud of my record. One of my first jobs, the boss laid out the job description and what I was supposed to do, and he said, you need to be here at 9 o'clock, and that's when our day starts, and our day goes 9 to 5, and here's what I expect. Here's your breaks, and great. And he said, I'll be here at 8, and I'll get everything set up. You just be here at 9. Great. So things went pretty well for 3 or 4 weeks, and he called me in his office. And he said, hey, I noticed a couple days ago you got in at 9:01. And then like 3 or 4 days before that, you got in at 9:03, you know, and you add those minutes up over a course of a year, I mean, you're stealing from the company. And it bothered me because I normally am a guy who gets there a little early, or I think of myself that way, and it kind of ticked me off the way he was handling it. So that was a Friday or a Thursday or Friday, somewhere in there, end of the week. And the next week, I got there at 7. Supposed to be there at 9. And he got there at 8:45. Now, see, that's a problem because he was supposed to be there at 8 to get everything set up. And I didn't say anything about it. I just made sure I was in the hallway when he walked in, and so he could see me there. The next day, I got there at 7, and he was there at 8:15. The next day, I got there at 7, and he was already there. I don't know. He may have stayed the night. I don't know if he even went home. And I felt so smart about that, you know. Well, I showed him who the real worker is. Won that fight. It did nothing for our relationship. It just embarrassed him, and just made him feel dumb. And at the time, and even now a little bit, if I'm being honest, well, he deserved it. But this is the hard part with all this stuff. It's not about deserve, right? It's about this higher goal. And I look back at some of those things I used to do, and I'm not proud of it. If my higher objective is for us to be Christians together, if my higher objective is to raise the level of discourse, what I didn't accomplish that. In fact, what I did took me further away. And it makes you think, well, what was my main goal? Well, if I'm being honest, I wanted to embarrass him. That was my main goal. And I got that done. You just got to think about what your main ideas are here. What you're really trying to accomplish. I think we self-sabotage a ton at home and at work and probably at church. And when Peter talks about all these different things, that's what he has in mind here. You know, try to see the other person's side. Try to see why they're saying the things they're saying. Try to think about why they act that way. And all of you do it. This is not just for the few super saints, you know, who always do the right thing. This is for the regular Christian who's just trying to figure this out. This is kind of step one. And you think to yourself, again, that basketball player who learned that defense never slumps. The reason why defense should never slump is it's only about effort. I mean, there's some principles too, but it's 90% effort. If you'll work hard, you'll do fine. Well, it's the same thing here. I can't always control the magic of it, but I can control effort. And then Peter kind of widens his circle a little further. He says, don't repay evil for evil, which is what I did, insult for insult. That's the very thing I did, was repaid insult with insult. He says, don't do that. Don't do that, he says. On the contrary, repay evil with blessing, because to this you were called so that you might inherit a blessing. If you go this other route and you take the critique, you know, take it to heart, try to see the other person's side, try to come, and again, I'm not talking about with abuse. You know, abuse is abuse, and you're allowed to stay away from hateful people. I mean, but most people, again, are not genuinely evil. They're just as screwed up as you are. And so you try not to pay back all the time, but pay back with blessing. And the weird part is, and I'm not going to tell a story about myself on this, first of all, because there's not nearly as many stories of me doing the right thing, but I'm not wanting to brag here or anything like that, but I will tell you that I've done this enough to know that this works. Now, it doesn't always work. It doesn't always work. Sometimes you repay evil for blessing and you just get more evil. But sometimes you wake people up in a way that being sarcastic or mocking them back never really is going to do. And you have to ask yourself, which blessing are you really after? See, I'm convinced, even those stupid TV shows, that there's this hunger in our hearts that we want to be part of something like that, where everybody just likes each other. You know, we want to go someplace where everybody knows your name. It would surprise. We go to church camp. I'll be at church camp a couple times this summer, and at church camp, and it really wasn't just camp. I went to an FFA camp once. It was that whole era of my youth, when people would lay down to go to sleep in these bunkhouses, somebody would say, "Good night, John boy," and they'd all pass that around. Everybody thought that was hysterical. And it was just a very short era. But it was because of this show that most people my age didn't even like. But this picture of this family that would just stick together no matter what. There's something about that it's just magnetic. And so you got to think about, well, what blessing is it that you're after? You know? Is it just self-protection, or are you trying to build something? And that's what Peter's talking about. And again, here he's talking in context of the church, but I think it works for any relationship. And then he quotes at some length Psalm 34. And you can read this word for word here in 1 Peter, and again, he's quoting it exactly from Psalm 34. It says, "Whoever would love their life and see good days must keep their tongue from evil and their lips from deceitful speech. They must turn from evil and do good. They must seek peace. They must seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and they're attentive to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil." And again, Peter's quoting that because it's backing up his point. You've got to decide who you want to be. You've got to decide who you want to be. and who you want to, the world that you want to see come into fruition. And then you approach it, and you know if you do that God's going to win, and that God's going to come through, and that God ultimately is going to take us there if we'll just give him a chance. I read a quote this week I hadn't read before, kind of stuck with me. And something else, I wasn't even reading it for this sermon. It was something else I was reading, and it popped up. It said, hell is the punishment for being unable to love. Dostoevsky said that, and thought that makes a lot of sense. And it kind of aligns with my views of heaven and hell and what they are. Hell is the punishment for being unable to love. It's when we talk about hell on earth, certainly in the big cataclysmic ideas like a war zone or something, it was hell on earth. It's just the absence of love. But we can use that phrase even in smaller deals. You know, I had to go see the family this weekend. That was hell, and that communicates something, right? It was hellish, you know. I think it can be a synonym for unable to love. I think, but it's not just a synonym for it. It's the punishment of it. When I turn that part of me off, hell is the natural byproduct of that. And hell is the reward, ultimately, for those people who choose to go a different direction. It's, you get what you asked for. And I don't know, the quote really hit me. I don't know a lot of Dostoevsky quotes, but that one really smacked me around. I think about the stuff we do to each other, the cruelty and the anger and the greed and the lust and the pride, and it's easy to get caught up in that, like a storm. You know, Julia and I went to the Grand Canyon last year, and right before we got there, some people died in one of the side canyons. There were, on the river there, they had tried to hike up this small side canyon, and a rain came up real big, and this huge wall of water came down. And you think, and you're out there, and how vast and big it is, and if you're in somewhat good shape, you think, well, I can climb out of that, but it's so fast. It's so fast, and if you don't see it coming quick enough, you won't get high enough, fast enough, and then you're caught in it, and there's nothing to grab. It's just slick stones, and some people died. I mean, hikers, people who are great at that, just got caught up in that wall of water. And I think about all the different stuff we do to each other, the anger and the pride and the revenge, the getting even, this big wall of water, and you think you can dodge it, and it's just so easy to get caught up in it, to not see it quick, to not react like you should, and then you're caught. And most of us at different times have done that. We just got caught up in it. Before we knew it, we were just as bad as everybody else. Or maybe not just as bad, but certainly carried our own weight of badness, because you get caught up in it. And somebody hurts you and you want to hurt them back. And somebody gives you a hard time and you want to give them a hard time back. And it's just the way of the world, you know. It's interesting to me, Andy Stanley pointed this out in a book a long time ago, but it stuck with me, how often we use financial language to talk about that. You owe me. You know, you stole the best years of my life. You know, a divorced dad, he's got his kid for the weekend. And what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to take my boy to do this and this and this. I wasn't very good last couple of weeks. I'm going to make it up to him. I'm going to make it up. I owe him. I stole that time. And, you know, if you owe, then you pay. That's the rules of the world, right? You owe, you pay. If you owe and you don't pay, they'll send somebody named Vito to your door to get that money. And when they send that big dude to get your money, there's a name for guys like that. They're called loan sharks, not loan bunnies, loan duckies, right? They're loan sharks. You expect them to be mean to get that money back. If you owe, then you pay. And that's the way of the world. And that's hell, but that's how we do. But grace unlocks all that. When we choose to be sympathetic, when we choose to love, when we choose to live in harmony, it unlocks all that. And again, I think the best is to start in this laboratory of a church. That's where you start. And as you work on it here, hopefully it can bleed into every other part of your life. And you're just showing grace. You don't pay back evil for evil. And it's hard. You're not excusing the other person. There's no excuse for what they did. You're just choosing to write that off. And you try to see the other person and not just see their sin. If somebody hurts me, all I can see when I see them is the hurt. And what Peter's challenging me to do is to look beyond the hurt to see the person. And it's real hard. But it works. And if Dostoevsky is correct here, I think that's what heaven's all about. I think when you do that, you unlock something much deeper. I'm expected to stick up for certain people. I talked about this on Wednesday night. I don't know if you guys grew up in a house like this. I grew up in a house where I was expected, if my brother got into something, I was expected to get into it too. If somebody picked on him or started something with him, I was supposed to jump in. Would get in trouble if I didn't. Mom and Dad, you don't understand. He started it. He's a moron. Well, I don't care, they'd say. You get in there, and if they, we're all in this together. And so you kind of learn as a family, that we're family. And I always like them, but you learn to do it. And you learn to give certain grace, right, to your family or to the people that you love. Somebody come to you and say, I probably shouldn't say this, but I got a little problem with your wife and what she did. And I would say, well, you can't tell me about it. I'm not going to agree with you. Well, you know how she is. Yeah, I know how she is, but I'm not going to hear from you about it. And because I'm not going to understand. I'm not going to understand your perspective because we're tied together. And I don't always agree with every last thing. And I know she doesn't always agree with me on every last thing, but we're together, And you allow a certain tolerance for the ones you love. I've mentioned this before. It happened several years ago. I was driving up 37 and somebody just blew past me. And I saw them coming. Man, they were just humming. And I drive pretty fast too. And man, they're just flying past me. And I'm kind of getting ticked off because they're kind of close to my bumper there. And then boom, out they go. And then when they get beside me, I know them. And it's like all my anger goes away. Like, oh man, it's a crazy dude. I don't know what he's thinking. And it's such a weird thing. I mean, nothing changed. I just know that guy. So then, oh yeah, hey, you got me, and it's all fine. It's a weird thing we do. We give an allowance to certain people. What Peter's wanting you to do is to spread that out wider. That allowance that we give to ones we love, make that circle bigger. Don't be so easily offended. Jesus came to bring us under his arms like a mother hen gathers the chicks. And all of you, Peter says, love one another. Be sympathetic. Be kind. Look for harmony. Don't pay back evil for evil. Be willing to lose the battle if it helps you win the war. So, today on Mother's Day, again, I know Mother's Day is a mixed bag for some people because, again, family wasn't always easy. But that ideal, the ideals we want to strive for in our heads. So let me give you a couple of encouragements that you can. I was talking to somebody this week, and I said, "Can I give you some free advice?" And he made some comment about, "Well, you know what that's worth, don't you?" And I know what that's worth. It's just free advice, right? So do what you want to with this. But my free advice is you be the one to initiate the grace. And on this Mother's Day, say a kind word to Mom if you can, even if she doesn't say very many kind words to you. Try real hard today to think about these higher ideals that we're about. And those people who are kind of hard to get along with, I'm not encouraging you to go under their shadow again, especially if they're mean or abusive or that kind of thing. But pray for them today. You can do that. And don't just pray that God will send hail or something on them. Pray for them today. Ask God to move. Think a little bit, if you don't mind, about your own hard heart. Those people who you're a little ticked with all the time. And again, maybe the other side deserves it. It may be all their fault. It might be. But think about some of those things. And again, I want you to pray about that too. And again, you don't have to pray that you just forget it all today, because that's probably too much. But just ask God for grace. For grace from Him to help you get through it, and for grace for you to be a little softer. Small steps that you can control, just a little bit of effort is the key. Knowing that God's going to come in on site, help us out. Won't you stand up? I'm going to have the band come back up here and lead us out. I want to leave you with one more thought, and then we're going to sing these songs here. God is singing your praises. When we get together here at the end and we sing these songs, we're going to sing His praises. But this notion that God is singing our praises, I just think that's such a powerful metaphor. He has such great hopes for you, And when you think about your own performance and how good and bad you do, I know it's easy, if you're like me, to pick out the bad. And I'm not wanting you to have a false, inflated sense of ego here on this thing or anything. But know that God is pulling for you. And we get together and we sing His praises here at the end, like we're going to do. And we call out to Him, and we share in these songs what the ideal is, what we want and what we hope for. Pour yourself into that a little more. Effort, right? It's just effort. You can't control whether the shot goes in, but you can control effort. But just a little more. And as you give that little more, know that He's singing your praises too. Just a powerful thing. Let me pray for you. Dear God, for this group here in front of us, as we close our service and we thank God again about your grace to us. We don't deserve it. We're not worthy of it. There's just not anything about us, even on our best day, that deserves a second glance from you. But you love us. You laid your life down for us, took real nails and thorns in your head and feet and your hands for us, and because you love us, and that you're singing our praises, God, and you're pulling for us. And so I want to, God, as I'm praying this thing, pull for the church. I want to pull for the ones in front of me here, God. And I want to encourage and pray for them, God, that they can take steps towards you and towards this ideal, this dream of family that you have, not just for the church, but for the whole fellowship of man. And that, God, you want to bring us in. Help us, God, to have that vision of heaven. It's not just about pearly gates and streets of gold, but it's about a family at a table, and everything's moved past, and it's a dream worth pursuing. I pray, God, that you drive that hard into our heads. In Christ's name, amen.